Hello, YouTube. We're going to do a little video here, have a little fun. We're getting a lot of talking head videos the last couple of weeks. It seems like this has become the new thing. I won't say it's a comeback because I used to do these all the time, but it is kind of fun to get back into this format. So I think we need to have a little bit of a talk. So obviously this week we had quite a bit of fun on the channel. The podcast episode got a little bit more traction than it usually does, but I want to talk about that because I think it was very interesting the way that whole thing came about. And then also at the same time, it's been kind of enjoyable being that this is kind of a case study. And I think the title I'm picking for this one is When Will We Learn? And it's kind of a good follow up to a video I did last week. So, what I want to do is I'm going to share with you a little video clip that I put together. It's probably about 2.5 minutes long. And then we're going to talk a little bit about it on the other side of it. For that, I'm going to give a little bit of a background. I'm going to go behind the scenes and talk to you about kind of how the podcasts are put together. There's not really a lot to it, but I'll give a little bit of background on that either way. And then the other part of it is that actually we're going to talk a little bit about how the response was given, especially once a couple of reactions were done to it. And I think it was very interesting, but at the same time, not surprising. I think that's really what the overarching theme is that it comes down to. One other thing I'll mention, though, is that a little bit of the stuff we're going to talk about, I wanted to do this as kind of just a straightforward talking into the camera thing. The plan right now is to have a conversation with Victor, the rookie card specialist. We're going to have a little chat on some content related things, this and some other things as well. There's a couple of things I want to talk to him about, and then we'll have that on the channel probably before the end of the week. So we'll see. We've got that kind of scheduled for now, and I'm looking forward to having that conversation. I think it'll be interesting to get his take and then also talk to him about some of the stuff that he's working on. So that'll be later on in the channel here before the end of the week, regardless. But specifically, what I wanted to talk about here is I'm going to play this clip. And then on the other side of it, we're going to talk about this a little bit because I think overall, I wasn't surprised. And what it really comes down to is when it comes to hobby social media, uh, at this point, it's become kind of clockwork. You know how this is going to go. And at the same time, it's still kind of fun watching it play out, watching the gears move the same way they always do. But let's play this first, and then I'll come back on the other side of it, and we'll clarify a few things. But then also at the same time, we'll talk out a few of the pieces that I want to talk to. So let me play the clip here. We're going to talk a little bit about something called rage baiting. And if you're not familiar with the term, rage baiting is a tactic often used online where content is created to deliberately provoke anger or outrage in an audience with the goal of increasing engagement and attention, such as comments, shares, or clicks. You can also call it engagement farming. It's where you literally say something. Now, again, important caveat here, you may believe the thing you're talking about, but you're going to present it in such a way that will elicit the maximum amount of response.
Jeff Wilson is the true GOAT of this hobby.
Wait for it. Keep going. Wait for it.
I'm not being sarcastic.
Okay.
He has the biggest YouTube channel. He gets the most reactions. This guy farts and thousands show up to smell it so they can tell you whether or not they like it or dislike it. And then they go on their YouTube channels and podcasts and tell you about it.
A few moments later.
Alf, this is the stuff we dream about as sports card content creators that occasionally make reaction videos to other content.
Eric, I got to tell you, ever since you got your laser eyes installed, you've changed, man. You've changed.
Just my
you
eyes
bumped your head, and then you got your eye cut,
mood.
and now Jeff Wilson's all of a sudden
the GOAT. I'm in some discomfort right now, so I'm spitting fire. The guy gave us a really good magazine with made up numbers in it, and then we took it to shows and fought with people over it because now we have our cell phones and eBay. You know, I mean, thanks. I appreciated it. It was awesome.
Eric, but what I got out of it is that you mentioned that, but then in the same breath, you're saying he went out for cigarettes and a carton of milk and never came back.
No.
You left us, Jim.
No, what
You
have you done
abandoned
to me
us.
lately? What have you listen? During the first boom.
Can we speak some truth bombs? Just since we're spitting facts here. Eric's talking about spitting facts. This is a spin facts segment. All right, let me spit some facts. Even if, Eric, I wanted to refute some of your points, I wouldn't because this is a lot funnier. I actually would much rather just let it hang. I think Eric makes some very interesting points. Carlos, you agree with him? That is what I said. I said I think he makes some very interesting points, and for the content purposes, because I am all about the content gods, it is much better if I just let it sit as it is and let the commenters have their say. Praise the content gods. Always. In all ways. So here's the thing. I included a couple of extra clips, by the way. I'm going to come back to Dustin. I included the clip there of Dustin's video responding to the original podcast. And of course, he had a clip on there that he included. And he did mention it in the video, but he did reach out ahead of time to ask if he could use the clip. And I said, yeah, absolutely, go for it. Eric literally asked for it. So he complied with that. And I want to actually touch on something related to the Sports Card Dad channel and basically what he did with it and the response that came on that channel. So everything I'm going to say, just so we preface it. So two things. I'm going to preface this by saying that everybody who watched the podcast episode and commented on that video, they gave their opinions, they enjoyed it. A lot of the folks that are regularly on the channel already kind of know how to play this and had a little bit of fun with it, which is basically where a lot of it was intended. But I am going to make a little qualifier on this just to give everybody the full context. So that's the first thing. Everybody was commenting on the video here. You're all great. And I appreciated the comments and the thoughtfulness that was included in there. And whether you agreed or disagreed, I think there were some really good comments there. On Dustin's video, there were a lot more comments. And some of those were a lot more kind of the eye-rolling variety. I did have fun with a few of them, though. I did respond to a few folks on there because, frankly, it's fun. But the reality of it is, now, I just played that clip for you. The first section of it was from a video I made last week on this channel talking about rage bait. And I gave the definition of rage bait. And I gave the whole, and then I played the clip from Eric immediately after. I also added a couple of things that weren't included in Dustin's reaction video to it, where I basically, had a little bit of fun. No, nobody even said anything about the Beckett joke. Eric is trying to feud with Beckett and Uncle Rich Klein, and that wasn't even included. The Geoff thing overwhelmed everything else. But regardless, so that was also part of the podcast episode. It was the same episode. And the other piece, the last piece at the end, was where I basically flat out said, so there were a couple of instances where it's going to play against the first part of the video because I want to basically explain one thing and then kind of add a little bit of context to it. So when I played that first clip, I guess the first question that should be asked is, so based on it getting reacted to, and then a bunch of people responding, especially on Dustin's video, very strongly to Eric's sensational hot take. Here's the question. So was it premeditated and intentional? I played that rage bait clip at the beginning, and by definition, then I immediately put the next clip right after of Eric saying that Jeff Wilson is a hobby goat. So was it premeditated and intentional as part of the podcast episode to drive some additional engagement? It was never going to be like thousands of views or millions of views, but was it intentional to drive additional engagement? The answer to that is no. And yes. Okay, I'll admit that's not a very satisfying answer. So I should probably elaborate a little bit more than that. So the answer is no and yes. And the reason I say no and yes is no, it wasn't premeditated. That wasn't actually part of the original plan. But I'll explain to you kind of how the podcast is normally done, because I think this will be kind of fun. A little bit of an illustrative thing and how this whole hobby social media thing works. The original plan on the podcast, usually what happens is before we hit record, we'll basically record these on Mondays, and when we go and do it, everybody will show up. They'll give me their little picture for the card of the week, that whole segment that we'll do on there. There's a couple of segments that we've got basically structured, but the rest of it is kind of loose. It really comes down to we'll have a conversation beforehand. Our big production meeting is a couple of minutes where we'll be BSing and throwing a couple of ideas around. And sometimes I'll already have an idea in my head. I want to talk about this. Or maybe Brandon will have an idea, or Eric will have an idea, and we'll throw a couple of ideas around and go, all right, you want to talk about this, this, and this? Sure. Okay. Once we're all in agreement, great. I hit the record button and we go. For the most part, it's pretty much in one straight shot. Occasionally, there may be a technical difficulty or something, and that'll get cut out. But for the most part, it's pretty much a straight shot, 90 minutes to 2 hours, give or take. So for this one, more or less, the idea was to do a follow-up. The rage bait video that I clipped at the beginning of that clip that I showed you was actually talking about Jeff Wilson's rant video from that same week or the previous week, talking about it from the perspective of how intentional was that, and my take on the script and the way it was presented and all that. I didn't even focus on what Jeff Wilson said because, frankly, I didn't care. It didn't really matter. But what I wanted to do for the podcast is, since I was going to have Eric and Brandon on it and I could bounce some stuff off of them, I wanted to then take a couple of minutes, and literally it was going to be a couple of minutes. That was the original plan. I was going to take a couple of minutes to talk about the actual content of it. Jeff Wilson said, 60s and 70s cards were boring. Eric collects 60s and 70s hockey cards. We could talk about that. We could talk about, how many set collectors when we were growing up versus player collectors or team collectors. We could kind of bounce some stuff around that. That was basically the entire outline for that section. So that was the plan. And originally, the beginning of it pretty much started heading down that path. But then I kind of handed the baton over to Eric, and that is where he decided to lay that hot take on us. Now, if you paid attention to the clip that I did include on that when he initially said it, my first response was really like, wait for it. And it's exactly what I said, because I was thinking, all right, waiting for the punchline, and you're going to pivot into a different direction. And he goes, no, he's not being sarcastic. And my right after that was like, okay. And I kind of just leaned back, because at that point, I just want to see, all right, so we're not going in the direction I thought we were heading a certain way. And actually, we're heading in a completely different direction. All right, let me sit back and see how this is going to play, because it's going to be, I'm game to take a little trip and let's find out where we wind up. And then he kind of just kept building. I will say, to Eric's credit, he has had a lot of concussions, but he decided to go with the most difficult to argue and indefensible kind of first take that you want to take on that, and then you're trying to build a case for it. I don't think he actually got all the way there. It might have been a little easier if he had just gone with, you know, Jeff Wilson has really gotten good at leveraging being a lightning rod, taking advantage of it. He does do certain things that he kind of knows in the back of his mind, whether you want to accept it or not. He does certain things that he knows are going to push some buttons. And that's kind of the direction he takes some of his content specifically to drive that additional engagement. What's the most ridiculous and silly thing he can say that will incite some people to react? I think that is a much more defensible. And then you could use the Howard Stern comparison. If you actually listen to the podcast, he uses a comp to Howard Stern and how he'll say stuff. And basically the goal is to get your detractors to pay closer attention to it than any actual followers you have. You're not so much worried about building fans as you are about just getting that attention for that period of time. And at that point, if you're able to successfully get people, because a lot of the detractors will be able to tell you everything he said, because the only way you can know everything he said is if you were hanging on every word and listening, because most people aren't going to catch that much of it. Even the people who like his content are probably not listening that closely. So the fact that you can quote me a whole bunch of stuff that he said this and he said that, and he contradicted himself over here, the more detailed you can be, the more of an avid listener you are. Most of us don't actually need to watch any Jeff Wilson content to know what he said, because somebody clipped it and threw it on social media, and that's how we find out a lot of these things. Now, with that said, in hobby terms, he's basically Voldemort, he who shall not be named. But as soon as you name him, there a couple of eyebrows raise and a little bit of attention happens. So what happens in this instance is Eric decided to go down this very interesting path. So we're kind of following along with it. And at this point, I said earlier, my first thing I said was that it wasn't premeditated, because it wasn't. That wasn't part of the original plan. But then Eric kind of pivoted and created his own plan. And at that point, I was like, okay, let's just see how this goes. So I'm letting it play out, and he's making his whole pitch and his whole argument, and he's trying to explain this thing. And we're becoming increasingly entertained. And if you did watch the podcast, you're going to see that I at certain points, I just have a smirk on my face, and I'm just listening to what he's coming up with and whole things. And once Eric goes for it, he goes for it. At this stage, we're having a good time with it. That's partially the reason I included that little clip with the Becca thing in there, because it's like, oh, scandalous. You're taking all these hobby goats, all these people. But one of the fun things about it is that it gets increasingly sillier from our perspective. Like I said, Eric is sincerely going for it and making the pitch. So my intention was to listen to the whole thing and then dunk on him on Friday. But as he kept going and the segment got longer and longer and longer, I knew at a certain point we had lost the original intention, because the plan was to do just the one segment on the Jeff Wilson rant video, talk about the content of it, which wouldn't take very long. There wasn't much of an argument made. And then we'd probably spend the rest of the time talking about the hockey playoffs. I was gonna let Brandon make his Jason Robertson card pump, and then I was gonna try to talk him down from that, while at the same time trying to see if I could buy some Mikko Rantanen cards on eBay. So basically, that's what the rest of the podcast episode was supposed to be. But then once Eric started going down this path, then I had a choice. As the person who edits the podcast, then I can be like, okay, as I said in the beginning, it wasn't premeditated. This was never the intention or the direction we were going to go in. But over the course of the next several minutes, as all this is going on, at one point, I literally grab a notepad and I'm like, I'm literally workshopping it while we're recording the podcast, and it was included in the podcast. I kept it in. I'm like, all right, so the title of this is going to be Jeff Wilson, Hobby Goat, ? I literally am like, now that I've got that quotable piece, well, that was what the title ended up being. I literally decided as we were doing it that, you know what, this is far too entertaining. I'm going to leave it be. And I decided to leave it in. I had the option to cut it out. I had the option to pause everything. And if there's a technical issue or something, you can pause it and just redo it and just edit it. With editing magic, you won't know the difference. We could have adjusted it a couple different ways, and it would have been probably about the same. He could have literally made the same points. We could have left out the hobby goat comment and this whole pitch and argument on that. And as you can imagine, it wouldn't have gotten nearly the response that it did, even on the reaction that came from it. And it was just very funny to me. But at that point, you are making an intentional choice. Putting that in the title, pitching it in that way, and leaving it be was a choice. That's why I included that last little bit at the end of the clip before the $1 Million Man cackle, because the $1 Million Man cackle has to be there. But in that last section, I said, I didn't actually try to refute a lot of Eric's points, specifically because I said, even if I wanted to, which I could have, there were a couple of points where you can go on the other side and actually have a debate and actually have a discussion on it. But it was already going long, number one. And number two, I knew that if I just left it as is, it was going to be hysterical to see how the comment section would react to it. And I was not disappointed. Like I said, on this comment section, a lot of the folks that are here have seen episodes in the live stream on Friday. This is old hat for you. The silliness is known, but in Dustin's comment section, they have no idea. They just know this is rando guy in these glasses, in the darkness. By the way, a couple of the commenters were fixated on this. I'll help you out. If any of you are new to this channel as a result of this Dustin's reaction, just to let you know, Eric had LASIK surgery. We actually made fun of him for it during the podcast, and actually there had been a little accident where he had been cut. Ironic, because he's a big knife aficionado, and he had been cut by a knife, and so he's got light sensitivity. So he has to sit in darkness, and that's why he's wearing glasses. It is intentional, and of course, we made fun of him mercilessly for it because that is the way. So regardless, that's the reason he was sitting in darkness. Generally speaking, he can say ridiculous things in perfectly lit conditions, but in this case, he did it in the darkness. So with that said, the end result of that was I made the call. I said, all right, no, we're going to roll with it. I'm not cutting any of this out. We're going to leave it as is, silly and ridiculous as it's going to be. And let's see how the correspondence goes. And in Dustin's comment section, we were not disappointed. Brandon was literally clipping stuff from the comment section, sharing it with us, and we were having a good laugh about it. But it goes to show, though, and like I said, the title was One Way We Learn. There is a media literacy thing where, there's really two parts of this. One is a media literacy thing of context clues, but also at the same time, how far beyond the headline do you go? Because if you take the title and that's it, and that's as far as you go, and you take that clip, and Dustin didn't misrepresent anything. The clip he used was from the podcast on it, and it was consecutive. He didn't edit it in any weird way to change the message. Eric did in fact go for it. He was trying to climb the Himalayas or trying to climb Mount Everest, without any equipment or oxygen. It was a bit of a bold move. I have to give it to him, but he went for it. I don't think he got there. I think he died somewhere in the mountain, but he tried. You give him credit. He did try to climb that mountain and see if he could get there. But my original intention was to dunk on Eric on Friday anyway, regardless. The end result, though, which was funny, and I want to share this with you, and it kind of, ironically, in the response that it got, it kind of, and this makes me sad because the commenters, you did this. There were a couple of reaction videos to it, and then the commenters, you did this. You kind of validated the man's point. And I'll actually show you from a screenshot from Dustin, the Sports Card Dad's YouTube channel, because it kind of emphasizes basically the whole idea behind this entire discussion. So here it is. Here's the page. And you can see there, just looking at this top row, the first video is the most recent one. Buying, grading, selling ultra-modern sports car for profit. That's only been there for about 7 hours. It's just under 700 views at the time that I'm putting this on there. Let me just refresh this and see what comes up. So there you go. After a refresh there, 722 views. But now take a look. This one here, obviously this 500 Foot Locker one did pretty well, 5,500 views, it looks like, plus. So really good. That's been about 3 days or so, give or take. Sports Card Bubble, Too Big to Fail. That's a pretty salacious title. You got a Jackie Robinson card in there. You got the bubble and the whole thing, and Dustin's making one of his faces. Seems like a kind of a standard video on his channel. It's got somewhere in the range of 2,000 views. And then look right beside it. We got Eric there in his sunglass wearing glory, with the Jeff Wilson picture and Dustin there looking side-eye. Jeff Wilson is the hobby goat. There's your title. And right there, it's right at about the same amount of views as the thing from the day prior. So in other words, so just to be clear on this, you have a reaction video to a podcast on a YouTube channel that has a fraction the amount of subscribers as Dustin's video is. The general video gets a fraction the amount of views. So in other words, a podcast that the majority of Dustin's audience has never heard of, with a person the majority of Dustin's audience has no idea who they are, making a comment about someone else, Jeff Wilson, in the space, making a comment, making a hot take that they obviously don't agree with. Why would you care? And yet, the proof is in the pudding. All it required was the mention of his name. You don't know who this is. It could have been just some rando in the street, just yelling it out in the ether. And you felt compelled to click on it. And more importantly, you felt compelled to comment on it. And there it is. And it's just very funny. Oh, and actually, you know what? I want to kind of show one more thing here. And this is just part and parcel of the course. I thought it was very funny. Actually, I should do this before I should have done this before I left the screen share. But one more thing I quickly want to share here. If you ever want to have some fun and you ever want to see kind of how this works. And everybody's got their own path, everybody's got their own way. And as I said, Dustin asked to use the clip, and I said, no problem, and great. So I'm glad he reached out. We're actually on the Discord and we chat, and we give Dustin a hard time for it. But in this case, he did, frankly. That was probably one of the easiest videos he's going to do in a while, that reaction video. So for that, Dustin, you're welcome. But real quick, if you type in under videos and you type in G off, because apparently the commenters who are most passionate about it don't know how to spell it, G off will give you the correct spelling. But here's the thing. If you go in and search, and this, you can do this yourself. You're welcome to try it. If you type it in, Jeff Wilson breaks the internet. That was about, 5 days ago, 7,800 views. The one with Eric here, right front and center. All right. 2,000 views. The discussion with Jeff Wilson where he did the why so polarizing, that was less than 2 weeks ago, 5,500 views. But if you scroll through here, here's Dustin talking with Jeff Wilson on his channel. And then here's a short related to Jeff Wilson. Here's what's going on with Jeff Wilson. This is from 5 months ago, how Jeff Wilson owns the sports card internet. So that's Dustin's title on that. Jeff Wilson blows 10K on sports cards about a month ago. Jeff Wilson is pro card cleaning. Completely disagree. That's about a year ago. Dumb Jeff Wilson trades. Jeff missed it. The debate is over. Jeff Wilson pivoting. Jeff Wilson sports card investor wild 130K trade. Topps files lawsuit, and Jeff Wilson stole my thunder. Is Jeff Wilson lying about Cards HQ? Wait, what did Jeff Wilson say? Jeff Wilson sports card investor speculation. You get my point. And this isn't a criticism. It's simply a statement of fact that Dustin has probably 2,000 videos and dozens, probably at this point, of videos that have Jeff Wilson title or Jeff Wilson thumbnail or both. Why? Because it works. Now, I'm not the kind here on this channel to go to the well that often. There have been the odd times where there have been a story related to Jeff Wilson or Cards HQ or something related to it. And I felt like, all right, I want to comment on this or react to this or do whatever. So I'll do it when I think it's appropriate. But frankly, if you compare it to a regular video right before it and right after it, you'll see a little spike. And most of the time, if you check the comment section of it, you're going to find the majority of people are like, Jeff Wilson's an idiot. He's the worst. He's killing the hobby. This. All you have to do is play the bell and they show up. And it works pretty much every time. So my point here is that it does say something interesting. And that may be something that I'll talk with Victor about a little bit. We'll do a little back and forth and discuss it. My point here isn't to tell you that it's good. And my point here isn't to tell you that Jeff Wilson's the GOAT. I don't think he is. I actually don't think there is a hobby GOAT, to be perfectly honest with you. There can be personalities and characters and people in the business that you like. There can be people, if you had an actual Hall of Fame, you could have people that are builders, people that are pioneers, people that do this, people that do that, people that just have a high profile. Mr. Mint Al Rosen back in the day was a big name in the hobby. Beckett is a big name in the hobby, synonymous with a company in the hobby. So there are people in there, if you want to go all the way to the very pioneers, the Jefferson Burdicks and those folks that kind of built the foundation, built the price guides and checklists and things like that got things going. But we also have our notorious figures. We've got the Brian Grays who will sometimes say some things that'll raise a few eyebrows. You've got your Ken Goldens who have quite a storied and intriguing history if you want to go back and look into it. There's a lot of that. There is, of course, the Bill Mastro right here on this channel. It's been a while now. I can't remember how many months, but I had Brian Gray on here and we had a discussion specifically talking about his discussion with Bill Mastro. And kind of Bill Mastro's history in the hobby and kind of how that plays into it. We had Kurt's Card Care. Kurt, for a moment, for a cup of coffee there, was a household name in a lot of things. He's still around. Grant from Backyard Breaks, he's still around. He's back on Whatnot. That's his own thing. The hobby has all these cast of characters, good, bad, or indifferent, and quite a number of questionable ones if you want to be honest with it. And then as soon as you add in the influencer class, well, then that list gets long. The point is, there aren't nearly that many that can elicit the amount of reaction that the Jeff Wilson can. So, like I said, I don't think he's the GOAT. I don't think you can make a legitimate case for it. I think that's a hill to climb that might be a little too difficult for anybody to make. But I will say I did enjoy Eric's passion in trying to climb that mountain. Even as I said, he died unfortunately on the side of it. I don't think he made it all the way up to the summit. He gave it a good college try though. I'll give him that. But I will say also that it wasn't a mistake. So as I said, to kind of summarize back to the beginning and the clip that I played off the top, it wasn't a premeditated thing to include it on the podcast. But once it kind of fell in my lap, it was a choice to leave it in. It was a choice to go with that title. And it was a choice to invite the kind of response that we ended up getting for it. Even if it wasn't like the maximum, like obviously Dustin got way more views out of his reaction to it. But it was funny and it was interesting how many people just read the headline, or just watch the clip, even if they did. Some of them, I argue, probably didn't even watch the clip, but they read the headline and then immediately had a visceral reaction to just the headline. Didn't even get past that point. Heaven forbid, actually watch the source material and see, because there was more to that discussion. I showed you a couple extra clips, including the one where, as I said, I fully laid out on the podcast in the recording that I decided I was going to include that in the title, that I was going to leave it all in. I included that in the podcast, and I included in the podcast my intentional choice not to debate Eric strongly on it and just let it play out in the comments and see how that was going to go. Because I kind of figured that there would be a little bit of a response to it. And frankly, I figured it would be fun to kind of play into it. And my favorite part about it is that I can truly legitimately tell you there was nothing clickbait about it. The quote on the front of the thumbnail is something Eric said, and the title is a quote from the podcast itself, something that was actually uttered on the podcast. All of it played out exactly the way it was shown. Nothing was misrepresented. But it is always interesting to see how people react to that thing. And it's also funny that even all these years on, because now it's been going on for years, all the way through. And one more kind of example I'll give you just to close off here is even Sports Card Radio, who have had obviously a long-standing kind of feud and back and forth with Jeff Wilson, Sports Card Investor. And if you go to their YouTube channel, they still, all the videos are obviously still there. Go and check it out, and you'll find in the playlist there is a Jeff Wilson playlist specifically for him, just including. And I think they've got very close to. I don't think they've got the most videos for him. I think that's for Breakers. For Breakers, they got some problem on there. But Jeff Wilson's got a lot of videos specifically on that playlist dedicated to him. And that isn't even counting the live streams they were doing where he'd be on the thumbnail all the time. He's a regular feature on there. And they had stuff to talk about, but he's an easy one to include. And if you include him there, you will get the extra clicks, more so from the people that don't like him than the people that do. So it's a very straightforward way to get their attention. Just invoke his name, say his name, and the people will appear. That doesn't mean it's a good thing, but it is something that still seems to be the case, even this far along. So as I said, I will come back. I'll do another video coming up here, a discussion with Victor, the rookie card specialist. So we'll talk about the content side of things because obviously it's just kind of fun seeing the thing play out one more time. Just has always been the case. Don't expect old Geoff to be a regular feature on here unless he does something, unless he does or says something interesting that I feel like is worth reacting to, in which case I won't shy away. But at the same time, hopefully between this video and the Rage Bait video, I kind of get across the idea that at a certain point, as a viewing audience, you do whatever you want. But I'm just saying, as a viewing audience, you may want to really consider the sources you're getting this information from. But also, more importantly, why are you reacting to these things so strongly all the time? Because it doesn't seem to be changing. Because a lot of times in these videos, I'll see, and in the reaction videos, I'll see it's the same commenters making the same comments. Who are you trying to convince? Your position seems pretty clear, and that's fair, but I'm not sure what extra value you're getting out of it. Again, do whatever you want to do, but I can find better ways of using my time. If it's really about the hobby for you, then probably I would spend more time watching the kind of content that actually gives you the kind of hobby stuff that you actually want, as opposed to the stuff that you clearly don't. So that's the part where I'm a little bit, even at this stage in the game, while I expected it, it is in some ways disappointing that it still plays out exactly the same way every time. And you can pretty much set your clock to it. You don't even have to think about, is there a possibility it's going to go a different way? No, there is no other way it could ever go. It has to go the same way every time. So when will we learn? The answer looks like never. It looks like we never will. Can't help ourselves. We always have to kind of go down that same way. But hey, at least we know the next time Eric is up to it, maybe he can be the GOAT again down the road, or something else, or maybe somebody else can be the GOAT this time. Maybe the proper conclusion to this is don't believe everything you see on the internet. Really, don't believe everything you see, because even if there is some element of truth to it, there's also can be a little bit of thought behind it. Even if it's not premeditation, there are decisions that are made. You're being presented something for a reason. Maybe what you should be doing is asking why. Just some food for thought. Thought I would have a little bit of fun with it since obviously that becomes the topic of this week. Now, I think I'm contractually obligated, so this is a sports card channel. So here you go. Sports card. See, there's a card. Okay. We're done. I've met my quota. More videos coming up on the channel. Live streams on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As I said, if everything goes according to plan, I will have a discussion with Victor, the rookie card specialist. That'll be on the channel hopefully before the end of the week. It might be even as soon as tomorrow. We'll see basically how the timing goes. I won't rush it. Otherwise, it'll wind up on the weekend. There'll be a live stream on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We can spend the majority of it dunking on Eric and finding out who else is a hobby goat or who else he wants to start feuding with, because apparently he just wishes to incite war. He wishes to incite nothing but infinite rage when we're out there trying to be men of peace. Don't allow this man to ruin our hobby. And I'm talking about Eric. To be clear, I'm talking about Eric. He is ruining the tranquility of this once peaceful hobby. Don't allow it. He must be stopped. And on Friday, we're going to try to stop him once again. And that's it for me. Please don't take hobby YouTube so seriously. I don't. Maybe you shouldn't either. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.